One of the greatest rags to riches stories ever told ended right here in this modest house on 107th Street in the Corona section of Queens, New York. The story began about 1,000 miles from here in New Orleans. That's where the man who lived here was born into dire poverty, but he didn't let his lot in life get him down. Instead, he got down with jazz, and he beat the odds by hitting all the right notes.
He changed the course of Western music.
He was a guy who completely rewrote the book.
He was a great man and loved around the world, and still loved around the world today.
This is where one of the world's greatest jazz musicians lived. This is where Louis Armstrong lived. Today, the Armstrong house looks exactly like it did when he lived here. The rooms are frozen in time. It's a rare behind-the-scenes look into the life of a man who changed the way the world listened to music. We're on the trail of Louis Armstrong. We're chasing history home. Lucille bought the house in his absence. So the cab pulls up, Louis gets out. He doesn't even know if this is his house. He sees this modest two-story home in an ethnically diverse neighborhood, and it's not until his wife Lucille opens the door that he peers inside and sees what will be his home for the rest of his life. So Deslin, not to state the obvious, but we are standing in Louis Armstrong's living room.
I know, it's great.
It's amazing, and you know, he must have been a wildly wealthy person, so famous, so accomplished, and yet his stuff is pretty modest.
This is very simple. He was a millionaire when he moved into this house with his wife Lucille. It was 1943. And he certainly could have afforded to live anywhere else. You know, he was a superstar, a worldwide star, and he lived a regular life here in Corona. He loved being with the neighborhood kids. He loved coming home and sitting on his couch, which was covered in plastic, you know, and having a drink and hanging out with his wife. And for him, this was life.
If you could try to get into the head of the past Louis Armstrong, how do you think he would have felt about his home being a museum?
He would have loved it. I think this is exactly what he would say, yeah, that's right, this is good, you know. In fact, he left so many things for us that he himself was such an archivist, you know, he saved so much stuff in this house, so I don't think he would be surprised that it's a museum today and that people can walk through from all over the world.
Louis Armstrong's house was declared a national landmark in 1977. There are only about 2,500 of those in the U.S., so we're talking about a very special place.
Because he traveled so much, however, there are a lot of international influences in the house. His wife Lucille traveled with him, so you're standing near these screens that are Moroccan screens, for example.
Brought back from Morocco?
Well, or just designed in a similar style. Something she might have seen in her travels and thought this was good to have in the house.
I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the textured wallpaper. It was a very tactile place.
Right. Well, Lucille really was into wallpaper, and she worked with an interior decorator most of her life here in the house. So certainly together, when you go through the house, in many ways it's Lucille's home.
Lucille loved wallpaper, and there's hardly a square inch of paint in the entire house. There's wallpaper on almost every wall, fabulous patterned wallpaper. Even the closets are wallpapered. Even the ceilings of the insides of the closets are wallpapered. Not only that, each closet in the house has its own wallpaper pattern, which is not used in any other closet. There's also a bathroom on the main floor which is covered with mirrors. Every inch of the walls and ceiling is covered with mirrors, and the fixtures are plated in gold and imported from Italy.
Really, the house that we're sitting in, it's nicely decorated. It reflects Lucille's taste more than his taste. I think that he loved the home, and he was on the road a lot, so when he was home, it was time to kind of enjoy it. But Lucille had the hand in decorating and making it look pretty.
Looking at all the figurines here, everything looks like it's from a different country.
The figurines and other things on the wall, because he traveled so much and Lucille traveled with him, they would bring back gifts. And we don't know a lot about everything on the shelves, but certainly we know They were either gifts given to them from around the world or things they purchased, little trinkets to bring back and decorate their homes with. He wasn't a, professional piano player, but he composed music, he could write music, so he probably got on here and, doodled a bit. And certainly having a piano in the home was, status-wise, it was a thing to have. He probably had friends over who could play the piano and maybe have a little jam.
Was she the love of his life?
She was. She was a soulmate.
Because he had 3 before.
He did.
Okay.
But she was a soulmate.
That's okay.
And so I know a lot of our visitors are surprised when we say, Lucille was his 4th wife. There's that look of surprise, but and yes, she was his 4th wife. They met in 1938. He'd been married 3 times before. But really, they were still very young when they got together. He was, 37, she was in her mid-20s, and so they really spent the rest of their lives together, and they really spent the rest of their lives in this home together. So he really never had another home, and together they kind of set up shop and made this nice home.
Their palace. Right. So here's the queen, here's the king, staring at each other. Now here's what's interesting. She looks very serious, very composed. He's laughing his head off over there. Is that how they truly were?
I think they had a lot of fun together. Maybe this was a little bit too formal, a Lucille. Yeah. But this really is Louis Armstrong. It was done by an African-American artist, Calvin Bailey, and he painted Armstrong from a photograph that appeared on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine in the 30s. So, and he liked this painting enough that it hung here for most of his life.
The painting portrays the Louis Armstrong that the world would come to know. Horn in one hand and handkerchief in the other, and a smile, a very contagious smile.
He made it by the 1930s. Louis Armstrong was considered already the father of jazz. He had done so much for the music by the 30s. And he could have stopped there, but he went on, 5 decades of hit recordings and touring the world.
Well, that's the thing that, he went on and it continued to be popular. So many musicians are like, oh God, you should have stopped 20 years ago, and he kept going on and on.
Well, I think it was his music as well as his humanity. He was this guy who just touched people with his heart and his laughter and his joy of life. And, you can't lose with that, no matter what decade it is. So, his music was the best. And in addition to that was this human person that was very loving.
And here we are.
Here we are.
In his living room.
So, yes. Now, there's a lot more to see, and we can certainly take you through the rest of the house. So, would you like to follow me?
I would.
To the celebrity bathroom.
From the looks of this house, it's easy to forget just how big Louis Armstrong really was. But it also serves as a reminder that despite his enormous celebrity, he was really just one of the neighbors. A really, really famous one of the neighbors. Coming up. And so you grew up just feet from the famous Louis Armstrong.
Yes.
I can't believe it. You're a lucky lady.
Yes, I feel lucky.
And which 13-time Grammy winner painted this portrait of Satchmo? Oh my goodness. Next, when chasing history home, the Louis Armstrong house continues. In this quiet, unassuming Queens, New York neighborhood lived one of the biggest stars of the 20th century. Louis Armstrong was, and is, known worldwide as the man who defined jazz. But around these parts, he was just known as Pops. Well, we cased the neighborhood to see if any of his old neighbors were around, and look who we found, 83-year young Selma Geraldo. You grew up just feet from the famous Louis Armstrong.
Yes.
I can't believe it. You're a lucky lady.
Yes, I feel lucky. And then after Butch, I never felt him as a celebrity. I never knew he was a celebrity until he died.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You thought he was just your kindly neighbor?
Yeah, yes, and he was a musician and a generous person. And like anybody else, he just was himself. So I didn't know that he was famous.
Did you have a favorite song of his?
No. Oh, When the Saints Go Marching In.
Let's hear it.
I can't sing.
Oh, when the saints...
You sing, not me.
Go marching in. Come on.
Oh, when the saints go marching in.
Oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Bravo!
You couldn't find a nicer kind of person than he. He was a very humble person, very generous person. We didn't know that he actually was as famous as he is.
So what did somebody have to do to get invited to dinner at the Armstrong house?
Just be a regular person on the block. The room looked pretty much the way it did when he lived here. The tables and chandelier and the mirrors.
But not a lot of room. I mean, you know, it looks like there was a leaf in this table, but you can't expand it that much farther.
Still, we have many photographs of the Armstrongs with, you know, 20 people around the table or on the floor taking a picture for Thanksgiving or whatever. So they must have improvised somehow.
I've heard that he saved every recording he ever did and would record conversations. Is that true?
That's right, and we'll get to hear some of those. But when he was home, it was his hobby. He had this huge 1950s tape recorder, and he would sit in his den and he would put a record on and he'd tell you about the record, sort of DJ his own collection. And then he'd just record anything else going on. So friends hanging around with him or practicing the trumpet, he'd record anything. So he left us 1,300 hours of himself on tape, listening to music, talking about life. This is a celebrity bathroom.
Everyone should have one.
Yes. Well, although it's a little scary, all the mirrors, but it's gold-plated fixtures, full mirror bath. But Louis loved it. You know, he thought it was great. As a kid growing up in New Orleans, he had an outhouse. So for him, this was, you know, this was perfect.
And since he was a really, really busy guy, another very glamorous bathroom here.
No, it's great. All this silver foil wallpaper and the floral prints on it. His and her sing. There are cabinets in the walls, many of them, and again, the wallpaper is continuous, even when the cabinets.
Wow. This has a real space age feel.
Yeah, no, it was ahead of a lot of the design in the house, ahead of its time.
I'll say.
But the neat thing about the bathroom is that he listened to music all over the house, and including the bathroom.
Why not?
So why not? He could pipe music in from his den, and so in front of us here towards the you have speakers hidden in the wallpaper. So he had a good time in the bathrooms in this house.
You know, it's always important to have a good time in the bathroom, Deslin, and I'm glad to know he did. Coming up, he may have been the father of jazz, but when it came to his kitchen, he was singing the blues. And we'll get a chance to see what a 60-year-old iPod looks like.
He loved his reel-to-reel tape decks. That was state-of-the-art technology at the time.
Next, when Chasing History Home, the Louis Armstrong House continues.